What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to discuss a few things like James Trafford at 5 million. Do we finally have a 4.5 million playing forward? And then I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions as well. There's lots to get through, so let's jump straight into it. So a few people have asked whether James Trafford is worth considering at Man City. He's re-signed for them. He only costs 5 million in FPL. Unfortunately, the answer is no, unless Ederson gets sold, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. When this deal for Trafford was happening, David Ornstein tweeted to say that Ederson is staying and that Ortega is going. So it looks like James Trafford is coming in as the number 2 for this season. There's a few other journalists that tweeted to say that Trafford knows he's number 2, but next season he'll be number 1. Essentially, Ederson's 31. He's 32 in a couple of weeks. This is a long-term move. And Man City had a pretty good buyback clause in the deal when they sold him. So they've basically got in ahead of Newcastle. And if he's as good as they think he will be, it's a really good price and he can be their long-term number 1. But for this season, it's just a headache waiting to happen. If you want the Man City number 1, it's going to cost you 5.5 million, and that is Ederson. For now, I would ignore Trafford unless something changes over the next couple of weeks. So interestingly, we might have a 4.5 million forward in FPL this season that's actually going to get some minutes, who could be a good addition to our squads. I've watched a few videos on how to say the name properly. I think it's Mark Guiu, something roughly like that, from Chelsea. He's going on loan to Sunderland. Fabrizio Romano tweeted the other day and said, deal in place for a straight loan, no buy option clause, as Guiu remains part of Chelsea's long-term plans. The salary is covered by Sunderland, as he'll be an important striker for Labrie. I think you pronounce it Labrie. He's French, the manager. Again, I'll work on all that stuff over the next couple of weeks. So that sounds good, right? He's an important striker, therefore you'd probably assume he's going to get minutes. Just to temper expectations a little bit, we've been here before. A player that's 4.5 million in FPL moves from a top club to a Premier League team, and we expect them to get loads of minutes, and it just doesn't happen. That could be the situation here as well. So what I would say is, if you're set up in a 3-4-3 and you're really happy with your 3 forwards, this signing does not mean you need to rip up that squad. But if you're sat there with a 3-5-2 or a 4-4-2, and your third forward is already a 4.5 million player that's unlikely to get many minutes, you probably just put Guiu in instead. Because if he does get minutes, that's great value. So he's definitely worth considering. The negatives to put him in your squad, which I've seen some people mention, is if we all jump on him and his ownership goes up and he doesn't play, he will get sold and his price could come down to like 4.4, 4.3. All of a sudden you're losing money. But personally, if you're in a 3-5-2 structure, I think the upsides of him getting minutes are definitely worth it. And ultimately, you're unlikely for most of this season to want a triple up on Sunderland, so it's not like he's blocking a team anyway. Like, for example, Krupi Jr. at Bournemouth, some people are considering putting him in. There is a chance at some point you might want 3 Bournemouth players. It's unlikely, but it could happen. With Sunderland, I would say that's a lot less likely. So Guiu, 4.5 million, looks like he might get some minutes, but is he going to come in and be the first choice number 9 week in, week out? Probably unlikely, especially at the start. So let's get into some of your questions. Which 8.5 million midfielder do you think is best for game week 1, Wirtz or Marmoush? For me, this is just a question of minutes. I think they'll both get plenty of goals and assists, but Marmoush is more likely to score and Wirtz is more likely to assist. It's not to say that Wirtz can't score or Marmoush can't assist, because obviously they can both do both of those things. But looking at it, Marmoush seems more of a goal threat and he has better fixtures. So basically, it's all about your confidence levels in him starting, because first 3, Wolves away, Spurs at home, Brighton away, is probably better than what Wirtz has, Bournemouth at home, Newcastle away, Arsenal at home. My problem as always is Man City attackers outside of Haaland are really hard to predict. Like, I think there's a good chance Marmoush is just in that 11 quite a lot, like maybe 6 in every 7 games, 7 in every 8 or something like that. Is that odd benching here and there going to frustrate you enough to want to sell him, though? That is the problem. So if right now you told me Marmoush and Wirtz are both going to start the first 6 weeks, I'd probably go for Marmoush. I think he's probably slightly better for FPL. But because I can't be sure about that, I'd probably just take the minutes for Wirtz instead. I think he's going to be nailed in that number 10 role and probably playing close to 90 most weeks. So Wirtz is probably the one for me, but I'm that kind of manager. If you're someone that's got 10 picks that are fairly safe and solid and you just want to take a bit of a punt, then Marmoush is potentially great. So do you prefer Murillo or Milenkovic if I wanted a Forest defender? Now, when I first saw this question, I thought my answer would automatically be Murillo because he was so good for defensive contributions last year. But actually, it's quite close between him and Milenkovic. And I think on my defender video the other day, it was a mistake to not talk about Milenkovic a little bit more. You've also got Nico Williams for 0.5 million less, who put up 8.72 defensive contributions per 90 last year. That's quite comparable to Milenkovic at 8.38. If Nico Williams can get more minutes this season, his points should go up as well. So I did some quick maths, which is not my strong point. Murillo got 130 points last year. He played 3,188 minutes, 2 goals, no assists, and he got 38 defensive contribution points, or he would have done if that system was in place last year. That puts his new total as 168. For Milenkovic, 145 points last year, so a few more. He did play a little bit more game time, so 3,330 minutes. 5 goals, 2 assists. That guy is a monster from set pieces. And then 26 defensive contribution points. That put his new total at 171. So partly he beat Murillo because he played a bit more, but also it's because of that goal threat. So he still chips in with defensive contribution points, but he's much more likely to get you an attack and return. So actually it's really close between the two. My general thinking with defensive contributions has been, if it's a short-term move, like let's say I'm going for a free hit, I'd probably be slightly more tempted to go for the more attacking player and try and hit that bigger score. But over 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks, where it's a longer-term pick, I'd maybe favour the defensive contributions a bit more. The problem is, it's not like Murillo gets loads and Milenkovic gets none. He's still pretty good for them. So I actually don't know how to call it. Like, Murillo has been in a lot of my drafts and I've just automatically put him in, but I don't think I've given enough consideration to Milenkovic. Like, imagine if he pops up with a few goals in those first few fixtures that Forest have got, right? The fixtures are very decent. It is Brentford at home, Palace away, West Ham at home, Arsenal away in 4, and then Burnley away, Sunderland at home. I'm half tempted, like, looking at that, to just go Milenkovic and hope that his goal threat keeps up and maybe Murillo's defensive contributions drop down a little bit. It's hard to know. So that probably hasn't helped. But all I can safely say is whichever one of those two you've got in your team is probably fine. And I'm going to have to give it some real thought because I think the chances of me starting with a Forest defender are quite high. And I was set on Murillo and now I'm less so, which is why I like recording these videos because it makes me think as well. Nico Williams, only 109 points last year, but he wasn't always nailed on last season. He became nailed on, but that wasn't always the case at the start. 109 points, 2,588 minutes. So he's played like 700 minutes less than Milenkovic, maybe even more than that. I'm doing the maths in my head very quickly. 1 goal, 3 assists, so 4 attack and returns. 18 defensive contribution points, puts him at 127. So even if he just played the same amount of matches, you're already getting like an additional 12 or so points. It puts him close to 140. And by playing more games, you've got more chance for defensive contributions and attack and returns as well. So there's part of me that's been so set on Murillo, I've not considered another player. But maybe Nico Williams is just great value. Now, you can't be sure the next season the attack and returns will stay up or the defensive contributions will be the same. But I think Nico Williams is value. If you're struggling to find the 0.5, just put him in. If you've got the 0.5, flip a coin. Murillo and Milenkovic, both really good. I think if the deadline was tomorrow, I'd probably just go Murillo. But looking at that, I'm super tempted to look at Milenkovic now. So how important are price points? I feel like there's less focus on it this year compared to other seasons, while all the focus is on defensive contributions, which is quite funny because I've just spoken about that quite a lot in the last question. With price points, if you're new to FPL, what people mean by that is making it easy to be able to move to other players. So for example, if you've got 4.5 million defenders in your squad, and someone like Porro or Munoz or Van Dijk or Vardiol becomes someone you really want, you've got to make at least 2 transfers to get to them. Because you're at 4.5 million, you've got to go up to 5.5 or 6. So what people tend to prefer to do is start with at least one £6 million defender. Let's say it's Van Dijk. So that if Munoz or Porro becomes someone they really want, they can do it in one transfer. Similarly, if you start with Salah, for example, he's the most expensive player in the game. If you want to move to Haaland, that's 2 moves. You sell Salah to someone cheaper, you upgrade one of your forwards to Haaland, or you can move Salah to any other midfielder. Now, that's not necessarily a great example because if people have got Salah, they'll probably want to keep him, but just using it as an example of how it would work. I spoke about this in my no Haaland, no Salah draft, that when you spread the money around to have lots of premium defenders, Palmer, Saka, Watkins, whoever, you need multiple moves to get back to Salah and Haaland. That's why you'll see lots of drafts with 6 million defender, a Salah, and then maybe like a 7.5 million forward or a Watkins. It's definitely worth thinking about because you want to be able to be flexible. It's not the be all and end all though. Like if you think right now that going without Salah and Haaland is the best strategy, you're happy captaining other players, you still need to spend that money, right? You need to put it in other positions. You're going to have to spread it around. That's part of the advantage to not having those two big hitters. Likewise, you can't really, like, you could cover every point. You could have a 5.5 goalkeeper, a 6 defender, Salah and Haaland. But personally, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to set up. Having Salah and Haaland means you've got to make lots of other sacrifices. So I think the idea of having the most expensive player in each position does not need to be worried about. But having one of Haaland or Salah will make it easy to move to the other one if you need to. I think what's probably more important, and this is going to sound so obvious when I say it, but it's more important to be confident in the players you're actually picking and have confidence to just leave them in for a little bit. Because if you can do that and trust those players to score you points, the reason you picked them in the first place, then you can hold them for 2, 3, 4 weeks and you can start building up those transfers to move players around. So all of a sudden you can get that £6 million defender because you've got 3 transfers to sort it out. It's also worth saying that in theory this is a great idea, but let's say you start with Van Dijk and he has a really bad start to the season and Vardiol scores 3 goals in the first 3 games. Vardiol's going up in price, Van Dijk's going down, and so you might not be able to do it in one move anyway. But I think in general it's kind of handy to have somewhat of a balanced squad where for most players you can get there in 2 moves. I don't think you need to be able to get to every single player in one move. I think that will ultimately make a worse overall squad personally. I'm not completely ruling out Salah and Haaland, but I don't see me doing it. But being able to get to most players in 2 moves is probably the sweet spot. So there were a few different pre-season questions that came in. I've grouped some of them together. Harry Wilson has scored 3 goals in the last 2 games for Fulham. Should we give any importance to pre-season? What are your thoughts on Man United after watching pre-season matches? They look more organised. And then are we underestimating Man United? Now, personally in pre-season, I'm mostly looking for injuries to players. Does that mean I can't buy them? Does that mean that someone else might become a really good option? And also who's getting regular minutes, because that points to being fit to start the season and therefore playing plenty of minutes in the first few game weeks. And also what positions are players playing in? Is there someone that's listed as a defender that's playing regularly in an attacking position? Has a manager tried a new setup and moved someone around? That's what I'm looking for mostly. So take Gyökeres at Arsenal, for example. He's only just joined the squad at the time of recording. He's come off the bench against Spurs, and that's it. If he continues to only come off the bench in the next few games, especially the last one before the season starts, that would be a concern for me going into game week 1. Whereas if he starts the final 2 games that Arsenal have, that would be a good indicator that there's a good chance he starts in game week 1. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking at. If a player scores lots of goals in pre-season, could that give them confidence? Absolutely. If a team wins lots of games in pre-season, would that give them confidence? Like Man United, yes. Is it necessarily a great predictor of how they're going to do in the Premier League? Not really. So when Harry Wilson scored 3 goals in 2 games, have I given that any importance in terms of how I'm picking my squad? Absolutely not. I was not considering Harry Wilson before. Him scoring in pre-season is not going to make me necessarily consider him now. What's more important is trying to figure out whether Harry Wilson's going to get regular minutes in that Fulham squad. They got Iwobi that can play off the left. They got Josh King coming through, young talent as well. You know, Smith Rowe's there. There's links to Reece Nelson. Is Harry Wilson nailed in that attack? I'm not sure he is, but a few more games for Fulham might say that he is, and then maybe he becomes a realistic option. But scoring 3 goals in 2 games, like it just doesn't matter. I'm telling you now, I don't have a list to hand. There are plenty of players in the past that have scored lots of goals in pre-season and then have gone on to become not great FPL picks. And it's not even to say that Harry Wilson's bad, because if you look at him, right, he's only 5.5 million. And if he plays regularly, he could do well. But his minutes over the last 3 seasons have not been amazing. And it's Brighton away, Man United at home, Chelsea away to start the season. I think the good fixtures probably start in game week 4. I think there's other 5.5s that are probably better off looking at and then coming back to it. So Højlund scored the other day. You know, if he continues to score in pre-season, will that make me pick him? No. I think there's better options at 6.5 million. He could score a hat-trick in every remaining game in pre-season. I might give it a little bit more thought. I probably still wouldn't go for him. And then in terms of winning matches, like, it's great that Man United are playing well, but it's still just pre-season. They've still got Arsenal at home game week 1, Man City away game week 4, Chelsea at home game week 5. It's a difficult enough start. Not terrible because you get to play Fulham away and Burnley at home in 2 and 3. But what they're doing in pre-season doesn't really have an effect on whether I would pick them. So I'm more looking for injuries, minutes, and just general positional like play, and not positional play, but where players are playing and whether that's going to continue going into game week 1. The key pre-season game really is the final one. It doesn't mean that the first 11 in the final game will definitely be the first 11 in the first game of game week 1, but it's a pretty good indicator. So that's the one I'm most concerned about, you know, checking for all teams. So if we decide to bench boost game week 1, should we prioritise the better game week 1 fixture or better long-term fixtures? Now, ideally, you have the best of both worlds. You have a really good bench boost that's also good for the long term as well. But if you've got a genuine choice between the two, you go for the better long-term fixtures, I think. Because ultimately, you're trying to maximise the most amount of points in total over 38 weeks. And that might mean having a slightly worse bench for your bench boost, but picking up more points later on. And there's lots of reasons to want to bench boost in game week 1. You've got unlimited transfers right now. You can set up for it. And then when you wildcard out of it, you can remove some money from your bench. That's a big reason why people want to just get the chip out of the way straight away. But there might be a choice which means it makes more sense to go for the slightly worse pick in game week 1. So as an example, and this is not a great example because Spurs fixtures are actually pretty good for the first 8 game weeks. But let's say you were looking at Porro versus Munoz, right? So 2 attacking defenders for different clubs. Porro is obviously better for game week 1 because he's got Burnley at home and it's Chelsea away for Crystal Palace. But if you're convinced for the 7 weeks afterwards, Munoz is going to score a lot more points, then you should just pick him in game week 1. Now, you could go for Porro and then use a transfer, but that's obviously not ideal either. So it's really going to depend on which 2 players you're considering, but there are definitely reasons to go for a slightly worse bench. For example, with the squads that I've looked at building, a lot of the time it's got a 4 million goalkeeper, which isn't going to play, and I've got like a Crystal Palace defender on the bench. If we find out there's a 4 million playing keeper for game week 1, I'm going to get very, very tempted to bench boost, more so than I already am. And if I feel like that Crystal Palace defender is good long term, I'll just play them against Chelsea away. Because the thinking would be, getting that bench boost out of the way straight away with unlimited transfers will earn me more points than having to spend lots of transfers later on getting a good bench boost, if that makes sense. So ideally, you have a great bench boost and then great long-term fixtures, but it won't always be the case. And I'd probably prioritise the long-term points over the short-term if you're determined to use bench boost in game week 1, which seems like a pretty good strategy that I should probably give a bit more thought to. So could you talk a bit about why it makes sense to pick goalkeepers that are more expensive than 4.5 million when they don't get defensive contributions? Should we just pick a 4.5 million goalkeeper and invest the savings to upgrade a defender instead? So they don't get defensive contributions, but they do get save points. And they've always had that. And also this year, when a goalkeeper makes a save from a shot inside the box, they get 3 BPS towards the bonus system, whereas they used to only get 2. So there's more chance of a goalkeeper picking up bonus now, and they still have save points, which are quite similar to defensive contributions. So that's one reason. Now, you might counter that by saying 4.5 million goalkeepers are in worse teams, therefore they'll make more saves, generally anyway. Absolutely correct. And also, by the end of the season, there will be 1 or 2 4.5 million goalkeepers that do really well. The problem is it's not always so easy to know in game week 1 who that might be. For 5 million, you also get, in theory, better defences. So Sanchez at Chelsea or Sells at Nottingham Forest, they got a good or like a slightly better chance of getting you clean sheets. So while defensive contributions for defenders are important and save points for goalkeepers are important too, so are clean sheets. So if you think Chelsea are going to get a lot more clean sheets than Brentford, then it makes sense to pick Sanchez over Keller. Now, for what it's worth, in my 15 years of playing FPL, 4.5 million goalkeepers as a strategy tend to do really well. So there's every reason to pick Kelleher or Petrovic or Jose Sarr or whoever it might be. But I do think personally spending 5 million and getting to back the Chelsea defence, for example, could be worthwhile. If you want a short-term goalkeeper, first 6 weeks, Sales at Forest is great. And then maybe you wildcard out of it. So if you're happy with the rest of the squad and you've got a 4.5 goalkeeper, I would not be going out of my way to upgrade it. There are reasons to spend more money. Similarly, how a lot of the 6 million defenders, Gabriel, Cucurella, Vardio, etc., aren't great for defensive contributions, but there's still reason to pick them. Clean sheets, attack and returns, etc. Hopefully that has helped. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Get your team rated for free on Fantasy Football Hub by clicking that link in the description below. And I'll be back soon for another video.